Hi everyone, welcome. I'm L.J.M. Owen. I'm the author of the Tasmanian crime novel, The Great Divide, and the Dr. Pym's archaeological mystery series. I'm also the host of Book Love Tuesdays, and I'm here today to chat with B.Michael Radburn, or Baz as we like to call him, about his recent release, Subterranean. Hi Baz.
Hi LJ, thanks for having me today, it's great.
My pleasure. It's a contemporary romance with a twist of crime. I'm going to jump straight in and ask you about the novel. So you're a self-confessed hairy biker. In the past, you've written horror and science fiction. You're a crime novelist, and you used to be a romance writer for Woman's Day. So with such a diverse background, I'd love to know why you decided to write this story and this story right now.
Well, isn't that a remarkable insight into my mind? It looked like all of my pieces. They're an amalgam of characters and ideas that float around in my head for up to a decade and then finally come together as a story. And that's definitely how this came. I had a brilliant setting beneath the streets of Sydney with the history background of the tunnels leading all the way to back to World War II and beyond. And then we had the story of the veterans living rough out on the streets these days. Like last year, I think we were looking at 5,800 within a 12-month period. And of course, domestic abuse. I mean, the three of those came together to tell that tale in that setting, and it all just seemed to fit. Started as a film treatment and grew into the novella, the sort of that you see now, which I'm really proud of and I'm really happy with.
So something that I think most writers find quite difficult, but I think you've really managed with Subterranean, is creating two main characters that are very different but equally compelling. So in Subterranean, we have Cassie Belrose, the person who's escaping domestic violence, and we have Daniel Woodsman, who's the homeless military vet. I wanted to know, where did those two characters come from? Did they just spring fully formed in your mind, or did you have to spend some time getting to know them?
I think, like all characters, like I said, the genesis floats around for a little while, and then you do get to know them over time, and particularly when you're writing. When I write a piece, I plan it fairly meticulously. I'm a bit of a plotter when it comes to that side of it, rather than a painter. But there is a little bit of the painting, because I learned a long time ago to keep enough room in that synopsis for the stories and the characters to develop themselves and take you where they want to eventually, sort of thing. So yeah, they came. There's two parts of my life there. Domestic abuse I saw firsthand as a child. My service, my 6 years service in the army. I've seen PTSD that's affected some of my friends and colleagues in there, and the two of those, I think it was a part of that journey of the two coming together to make the whole for them, both seeking that change in their life or that redemption. And I think that wasn't going to happen for either of them until they met each other.
I like to hear about the emotional journey of all writers. So in writing this particular story, did you experience an emotional journey yourself, or did it have an emotional impact on you to explore this particular story at that point in your life?
If you want to be honest with yourself as a writer, you have to take yourself to some dark places, whether that's on your own personal journey or someone else's. So yeah, there were triggers in there sometimes from the past, but certainly nothing that was crippling. I approach it fairly calmly and coolly when it comes to the creative writing, and that's probably the distance you need. It would be different if I decided to write a non-fiction piece on either of those subjects, and that would take you to some very dark places because you didn't have that mask of fiction to say, no, I'm just using the subject. I'm not using a real person's life or a real person's situation. That becomes a much harder emotional journey, I think, for an author. I know many true crime writers that, like the police and detectives that they talk to and the criminals they talk to, it's hard to shake that stuff. It does take you to some dark places. So I think as a fiction writer, that's my armor against that sort of thing, if that makes sense.
I think it reads that way. It reads so well that those themes are there and they're obviously impacting both the main characters, but the actual plot just rolls along so quickly, and the interplay between Cassie and Daniel is just so lovely. It doesn't overwhelm the story, but you are aware that those themes are there. So the other main part of the backdrop to the story are the mostly forgotten subterranean tunnels and railways from World War II that form the backdrop of the novel. I'd never heard of them myself. I wondered how you discovered them, how you explored them, how you actually got to incorporate them in this work, because they make a fantastic backdrop, and I don't think I've ever seen another novel with that particular setting.
They've been there since the 1920s. The cut and cover process was through the below the park, or through the park then, back in the 20s, and the forgotten tunnels now are the original Eastern Suburbs line, which was aborted towards the end of the project and never picked up again. So as a young man, I remember I was always drawn to two particular underground stations, and that's Museum and St. James. And because they were always like going back in time. And today, when you go through there, they've maintained that 1940s look about it. You feel like you're actually below the streets of London in the Blitz. Even when you go through there, it's quite remarkable. And knowing that at the St. James station is the access point for the abandoned tunnels, which is still maintained to a certain extent by city trains. It is quite remarkable. They're so close to the public every day, and a lot of those people wouldn't know that they're just beyond a brick wall or a door on those stations, sort of things. The deeper you dug, the more remarkable it is. You could tell a story just about the tunnels themselves, as far as their use as air raid shelters during the Second World War. The RAAF used it as a headquarters throughout that period too, being underground. MacArthur himself had used, as I've mentioned in the story, that MacArthur had used those underground facilities too for a short time.
How did you first find out about them?
As a child, as a teenager, rather rebellious, there was...
Really? No.
I believe people could access it if they truly wanted to back then, but there were actually you could go on tours set by the Sydney Trains at the time, right up until 9/11 when they stopped them because the one they call with Lake St. James in it, the flooded tunnel goes right directly under Parliament House, so they stopped the tours there.
I was going to say they didn't want anyone getting any Guy Fawkes ideas.
Exactly. That's right. And the old signage and everything and the blast doors, they're all still down there. It's remarkable. Right.
I think most people who read this won't have heard of the abandoned railways under Sydney either, and will really, really enjoy that part of the story.
It's cool.
But look, overall, we've talked about some fairly heavy themes and the historical backs, but overall, it is a romance. It is a romance between two people whose lives change because they meet each other. And I was just wondering what drew you with your background, that you're a self-confessed Harry Bikie with your background as a science fiction, a fantasy, a crime. What drew you to become a romance writer?
It was one of those accidental things in life. I decided that I wanted to write my first novel, but the CV was lacking. So it was simply a matter of, okay, what markets are out there? And if I'm going to do it, let's shoot for paying markets.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, and back then there was a lot of women's magazines that took on fiction and paid reasonably well. ACP's editor at the time was very kind to me. It took me maybe 2 shots before I got the formula right. I read a lot to have a look and see if, and I felt there was a bit of a formula there. The twist in the tale was important. I thought, well, if I can give it a slightly darker twist in the tunnel, that in the tale, that will give me my own brand. And from there, it just worked well. And Julie Redlich, I had a great relationship with her for 10 years as the editor. I actually dedicated Subterranean to her for that same reason, because as for romance, that was the beginning of the journey. And she would often come back and say, I love the story, but Baz, it's a little dark. Can you just tone down the ending? So, but she always asked me to do the Halloween issues, the anything but any of the special ones. I was very good at the time at, if she wanted something for Anzac Day or if she wanted something for Valentine's Day, I seemed to have the knack to be able to fit those themes into her stories. It was a lovely time, and I really enjoyed it. I worked under a pseudonym of J. O'Brien at the time, and so it was asexual. J could have been Jane, or it could have been James. It could have been anyone. I'd love to do a collection one day of the best of those stories, because there was, over that period, there must have been 60, 70 stories in there. So, and possibly call it the skeleton in the closet. There was one story I remember called Skeleton in the Closet, and I thought this would be good to sort of almost come out as a, this is what I did under this pseudonym. So
lift the helmet.
That's right. Yeah.
Look, all of that experience, I think, really shows in Subterranean as well. So I think that we're actually probably out of time for today. But I wanted to say thank you so much for chatting to me today. And again, I would strongly encourage anyone who sees this video to, as soon as we're finished, jump online their favourite bookshop and grab a copy of Subterranean and read this weekend. It's a romance, it's mystery, it's adventure. There's this searing honesty between the characters that it just draws you into their journey, and I think everyone will just love Subterranean. So thank you so much for chatting to me today, Baz, and stay safe and have a great week.
Thank you, L.J. Most appreciated for those kind words, and everything you do for Australian authors and writing in general in this country. You're an absolute gem.